Okay, today I'm going to learning Jobs Stanford speech. Let's go.
I'm honored to be with you today for your commencement from one of the finest universities in the world.
I'm honored to be with you today at your commencement from one of the finest university in the world.
Truth be told,
Truth be told,
I never graduated from college,
I never graduated from college,
and
and
this is the closest I've ever gotten to a college graduation.
this is the closest I've ever gotten to a college graduation.
Today, I want to tell you three stories from my life.
Today, I want to tell you three stories my life.
That's it.
That's it.
No big deal.
No big deal.
Just three stories.
Just three stories.
The first story is about connecting the dots.
The first story is about connecting the dots.
I dropped out of Reed College after the first 6 months,
I dropped out of Reed College after the first 6 months,
but then stayed around as a drop-in for another 18 months or so before I really quit.
but then stayed around as a drop-in for another 18 months or so before I really quit.
So why'd I drop out?
So why did I drop out?
It started before I was born.
It started before I was born.
My biological mother
My biological mother
was a young, unwed graduate student.
was a young unwed college graduate student,
And she decided to put me up for adoption.
and she decided to put me up for adoption.
She felt very strongly that I should be adopted by college graduates.
She felt very strongly that I should be adopted by college graduated.
So everything was all set
So everything was all set
for me to be adopted at birth by a lawyer and his wife.
for me to be adopted at birth by a royal and his wife.
Except that when I popped out,
Except that when I popped out,
they decided at the last minute that they really wanted a girl.
they decided at the last minute that they really want a girl.
So my parents, who
So my parents,
were on a waiting list, got
who were on a waiting list,
a call in the middle of the night asking,
got a call in the middle of the night asking,
"We've got an unexpected baby boy.
we've got an unexpected baby boy.
Do you want him?"
Do you want him?
They said,
They said,
"Of course."
of course.
My biological mother found out later
My biological mother found out later
that my mother had never graduated from college
that my mother had never graduated from college,
and that my father had never graduated from high school.
and that my father had never graduated from high school.
She refused to sign the final adoption papers.
She refused to sign the final adoption papers.
She only relented a few months later when
She only relented a few months later
my parents promised
when my parents promised
that I would go to college.
that I would go to college.
This was the start in my life.
This was it. This was the start in my life.
And 17 years later,
And 17 years later,
I did go to college.
I did go to college.
But I naively chose a college that was almost as expensive as Stanford.
But I naively chose a college that was almost as expensive as Stanford.
And all of my working class parents' savings were being spent on my college tuition.
And all of my working class parents' savings were being spent on my college tuition.
After 6 months,
After 6 months,
I couldn't see the value in it.
I couldn't see the value in it.
I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life,
I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life,
and no idea how college was going
and no idea how college
to help me figure it out.
was going to help me figure it out.
And here I was, spending all of the money my parents had saved their entire life.
And here I was spending all of the money my parents had saved their entire life.
So I decided to drop out and trust that it would all work out okay.
So I decided to drop out and trust that it would all work out okay.
It was pretty scary at the time,
It was pretty scary. It was pretty scary at the time.
but looking back,
But looking back,
it was one of the best decisions I ever made.
it was one of the best decisions I ever made.
The minute I dropped out, I could stop taking the required classes that didn't interest me
The minute I dropped out, I could stop taking the required classes that didn't interest me
and begin dropping in on the ones that looked far more interesting.
and begin dropping in on the one that looked far more interesting.
It wasn't all romantic.
It was all romantic.
I didn't have a dorm room,
I didn't have a dorm room,
so I slept on the floor in friends' rooms.
so I slept on the floor in friend's room.
I returned Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits to buy food with.
I returned Coke bottles for the 5 silver jab deposit to buy food with.
And I would walk the 7 miles across town every Sunday night to get
And I would work the 7 miles across town every Sunday.
one good meal a week at the Hare Krishna temple.
On Sunday night to get one good meal a week at the Hare Krishna temple. I loved it.
Loved it.
I loved it.
And much of what I stumbled into
And much of what I stumbled into
by following my curiosity and intuition turned out to be priceless later on.
by following my curiosity and intuition turned out to be priceless later on.
Let me give you one example.
Let me give you one example.
Reed College at that time offered perhaps the best calligraphy instruction in the country.
Reed College at the time offered perhaps the best calligraphy instruction in the country.
Throughout the campus, every poster,
every poster,
every label on
every drawer
was beautifully hand calligraphed.
was beautifully hand calligraphed.
Because I had dropped out and didn't have to take the normal classes,
Because I had dropped out and didn't have to take the normal classes,
I decided to take a calligraphy class to learn how to do this.
I decided to take calligraphy classes to learn how to do this.
I learned about serif and sans serif typefaces,
I learned about serif and sans serif typefaces,
about varying the amount of space between different letter combinations,
about varying the amount of space between different letter combinations,
about what makes great typography great.
about what makes great typography great.
It was beautiful,
It was beautiful,
historical,
historical,
artistically subtle in a way that science can't capture. And I found it
artistically subtle in a way that science can't capture.
fascinating.
And I found it fascinating.
None of this had even a hope of any practical application in my life.
None of this had even a hope.
But 10 years later,
잠깐만.
hope of any practical application.
None of this had even a hope of any practical application in my life.
But 10 years later,
But 10 years later,
when we were designing the first Macintosh computer,
when we were designing the first Macintosh computer,
it all came back to me.
it all came back to me.
And we designed it all into the Mac.
And we designed it all into the Mac.
It was the first computer with beautiful typography.
It was the first computer with beautiful typography.
If I had never dropped in on that single course in college,
If I had never dropped in on that single course in college,
the Mac would have never had multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts.
The Mac would have never had multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts. 아씨, 졸라 어렵네.
And since Windows just copied the Mac,
And since Windows just copied the Mac,
it's likely that no personal computer would have them.
엄마,
And since Windows just
it's likely that no personal computer would have them.
copied the Mac, it's likely that no personal computer would have them. If I had never dropped out,
If I had never dropped out,
I would have never dropped in on that calligraphy class.
I would have never dropped in on this calligraphy class.
And personal computers might not have the wonderful typography that they do.
And personal computers might not have the wonderful typography that they do.
Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college.
Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college.
But it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later.
But it was very, very clear looking backward 10 years later.
Again, you
Again,
can't connect the dots looking forward.
you can't connect the dots looking forward.
You can only connect them looking backwards.
You can only connect them looking backwards.
So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future.
So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future.
You have to trust in something.
You have to trust in something.
Your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever.
You got destiny, life, karma, whatever.
Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give
Because believing that the dots will connect down the road
you the confidence to follow your heart.
will give you the will give the confidence to follow your heart,
Even when it leads you off the well-worn path.
even when it leads you off the well-worn path.
And that will make all the difference.
And that will make all the difference.
My second story is about love and loss.
My second story is about love and loss.
I was lucky.
I was lucky.
I found what I love to do early in life.
I found what I loved to do early in life.
I was lucky. I found what I loved to do early in life. Woz and I started Apple in my parents' garage when I was 20.
Was and I started the Apple in my parents' garage when I was 20.
We worked hard, and in 10 years, Apple had grown from just the two of us in a garage
We worked hard, and in 10 years, Apple had grown from just the two of us in a garage
into a $2 billion company with over 4,000 employees.
into a $2 billion company with over 4,000 employees.
We
4,000 맞나?
us in a garage into a $2 billion company with over 4,000 employees.
4,000 employees.
We just released our finest creation,
We had just released our finest creation,
the Macintosh, a year
the Macintosh,
earlier, and I just
a year earlier,
turned 30.
and I had just turned 30,
And then I got fired.
and then I got fired.
How can you get fired from a company you started?
How can you get fired from a company in your started?
Well,
Well,
as Apple grew, we hired someone who I thought was very talented to run the company with me.
as Apple grew, we hired someone who I thought was very talented to run this company with me.
And for the first year or so, things went well.
And for the first year or so, things went well.
But then our visions of the future began to diverge, and eventually we had a falling out.
야, 왜 이렇게 빨라, 씨.
Went well. But then our visions of the future began to diverge, and eventually we had a falling out.
Falling out. But then our visions of the future began to diverge, and eventually we had a falling out.
When we did, our board of directors sided with him.
When we did, our board of directors sided with him.
And so at 30, I was out.
And so at 30, I was out.
And very publicly out.
And very publicly out.
What had been the focus of my entire adult life was gone.
What had been the focus of my entire adult life was gone.
And it was devastating.
And it was devastating.
I really didn't know what to do for a few months.
I really didn't know what to do for a few months.
I felt that I had let the previous generation of entrepreneurs down.
I felt that I had let the previous generation of entrepreneurs down.
That I had dropped the baton as it was being passed to me.
That I had dropped the baton as it was being passed to me.
I met with David Packard and Bob Noyce and tried to apologize for screwing up so badly.
I met with David Packard and Bob Noyce and tried to apologize for screwing up so badly.
But something slowly began to dawn on me.
But something I slowly began to dawn on me.
I still loved what I did.
I still loved what I did.
The turn of events at Apple had not changed that one bit.
The turn of the events at Apple had changed that one bit.
I'd been rejected,
I had been rejected,
but I was still in love.
but I was still in love.
And so I decided to start over.
And so I decided to start over.
I didn't see it then,
I didn't see them,
but it turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me.
but it turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me.
The heaviness of being successful
The happiness of being successful
was replaced by the lightness of
was replaced by the lightness
being a beginner again,
of being a beginner again,
less sure about everything.
less sure about everything.
During the next 5 years, I started a company named Next.
During the next 5 years, I started company named Next,
Another company named Pixar,
another company named Pixar,
and fell in love with an amazing woman who would become my wife.
and fell in love with an amazing woman who would become my life.
Pixar went on to create the world's first computer animated feature film, Toy
Pixar went on to create the world's first computer animated feature film,
Story,
Toy Story,
and is now the most successful animation studio in the world.
and is now the most successful animation studio in the world.
In a remarkable turn of events,
In a remarkable turn of events,
Apple bought Next,
Apple bought Next.
and I returned to Apple,
I returned to Apple.
and the technology we developed at Next is at the heart of Apple's current renaissance. And
아씨, 왜 이렇게 어려워?
to Apple, and the technology we developed at Next is at the heart of Apple's current renaissance.
And the technology we developed and next is at the heart of Apple's current renaissance.
And Lorene and I have a wonderful family together.
And Lauren and I have a wonderful family together.
I'm pretty sure none of this would have happened if I hadn't been fired from Apple.
I'm pretty sure none of this would have happened if I hadn't been fired from Apple.
It was awful tasting medicine,
It was awful testing medicine,
but I guess the patient needed it.
but I guess the patient needed it.
Sometime life's gonna hit you in the head with a brick.
Sometimes life going to hit you the head with a brick.
Don't lose faith.
Don't lose faith.
I'm convinced that the only thing that kept me going was that I loved what I did.
I'm convinced that the only thing that kept me going was that I loved what I did.
You've got to find what you love.
You've got to find what you love,
And that is as true for work as it is for your lovers.
and that is as true for your work as it is for your lovers.
Your work is going to fill a large part of your life.
Your work is going to fill a large part of your life,
And the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work.
and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe in is great work.
And the only way to do great work is to love what you do.
And the only way to great work is to love what you do.
If you haven't found it yet,
If you haven't found it yet,
keep looking and don't settle.
keep looking and don't settle.
And like any great relationship,
And like any great relationship,
it just gets better and better as the years roll on.
it just gets better and better as the years roll on.
So keep looking,
So keep looking,
don't settle.
don't settle.
My third story is about death.
My third story is about death.
When I was 17,
When I was 17,
I read a quote that went something like,
I read a quote that went something like,
"If you live each day as if it was your last,
if you live each day as if it was your last,
someday you'll most certainly be right."
someday you will most certainly be right.
It made an impression on me.
It made an impression on me.
And since then, for the
And since then,
past 33 years,
for the past 33 years,
I've looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself,
야, 이렇게 빨라. I have looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself.
since then, for the past 33 years, I've looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life,
If today were the last day of my life,
would I want to do
what would I want to do?
I am about to do today?
What I am about to do today.
And whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row,
And whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row,
I know I need to change something.
I know I need to change something.
Remembering that I'll be dead soon is
Remembering that I'll be dead soon
the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life.
is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life.
Because almost everything,
Because almost everything,
all external expectations,
all, all external expectation,
all pride,
or pride,
all fear of embarrassment or failure,
or fear of the embarrassment or failure.
these things just fall away in the
These things just fall away
face of death,
in the face of death,
leaving only what is truly important.
leaving only what is truly important.
Remembering that you are going to die
Remembering that you are going to die
is the best way I know
is the best way I know
to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose.
to avoid the trap of the thinking. To avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose.
You are already naked.
You are already naked.
There is no reason not to follow your heart.
There's no reason not to follow your heart.
About a year ago,
About a year ago,
I was diagnosed with cancer.
I was diagnosed with cancer.
I had a scan at 7:30 in the morning,
I had a scan at 7:30 in the morning,
and it clearly showed a tumor on my pancreas.
and it clearly showed the tumor on my pancreas.
I didn't even know what a pancreas was.
I didn't even know what a pancreas was.
The doctors told me this was almost certainly a type of cancer that is incurable.
The doctor told me this was almost certainly a type of cancer that is incurable,
And that I should expect to live no longer than
and that I should expect to live no longer
3 to 6 months.
than 3 to 6 months.
My doctor advised me to go home
My doctor advised me to go home
and get my affairs in order,
and get my affairs in order,
which is doctor's code for prepare to die.
which is doctor's code for prepare to die.
It means to try and tell your kids everything.
It means to try to tell your kids everything.
You thought you'd have the next 10 years to tell them.
You thought you have the next 10 years to tell them
In just a few months.
in just a few months.
It means to make sure everything is buttoned up so that
It means to make sure everything is buttoned up
it will be as easy as possible for your family.
so that it will be as easy as possible for your family.
It means to say your goodbyes.
It means to say your goodbyes.
I lived with that diagnosis all day.
I live with that diagnosis all day.
Later that evening, I had a biopsy
Later that evening, I had a biopsy
where they stuck an endoscope down my throat, through my stomach and into my intestines.
where they stuck an endoscope down my throat, through my stomach, and into my intestine.
Put a needle into my pancreas and got a few cells from the tumor.
Put a needle into my pancreas and got a few cells from the tumor.
I was sedated.
I was sedated. I was sedated.
But my wife, who
But my wife,
was there,
who was there,
told me that when they viewed the cells under a microscope, the
told me that when they viewed in the cell under the microscope,
doctors started crying
the doctor started crying
because it turned out to be a very rare form of pancreatic cancer that is curable with surgery.
because it turned out to be a very rare form of pancreatic cancer that is curable with surgery.
I had the surgery,
I had the surgery,
and thankfully,
and thankfully,
I'm fine now.
I'm fine now.
This was the closest I've been to facing death.
This was the closest I've been to facing death,
And I hope it's the closest I get for a few more decades.
and I hope it's the closest I get for a few more decades.
Having lived through it,
Having lived through it,
I can now say this to you with a bit more certainty than when death was a useful but purely intellectual concept.
I can now say this to you with a bit more certainty that when death was a useful but purely intellectual concept,
No one wants to die.
no one wants to die.
Even people who want to go to heaven
Even people who want to go to heaven
don't want to die to get there.
don't want to die to get there.
And yet, death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it.
And yet death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it.
And that is as it should be,
And that is as it should be.
because death is very likely the single best invention of life.
Death is very likely the single best invention of life.
It's life's change agent.
It is life's change agent.
Clears out the old to make way for the new.
It clears out the old to make way for the new.
Right now,
Right now,
the new is you.
the new is you.
But someday, not too long from now, you
But someday, not too long from now,
will gradually become the old, and
you will gradually become the old
be cleared away.
and be cleared away.
Sorry to be so dramatic,
Sorry to be so dramatic,
but it's quite true.
but about it is quite true.
Your time is limited,
Your time is limited,
so don't waste it living someone else's life.
so don't waste it living someone else's life.
Don't be trapped by dogma,
Don't be trapped by dogma,
which is living with the results of other people's thinking.
which is living with the results of other people thinking.
Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice.
Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice.
And most important,
And most important,
have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. Inner voice. And most
important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition.
important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know
They somehow already know
what you truly want to become.
what you truly want to become.
Everything else is secondary.
Everything else is secondary.
When I was young,
When I was young,
there was an amazing publication
there was an amazing publication
called the Whole Earth Catalog,
called the Whole Earth Catalog,
which was one of the Bibles of
which was one of the Bibles
my generation.
of my generation.
It was created by a fellow named Stuart Brand,
It was created by a fellow named Stuart Brand,
not far from here in Menlo Park,
not far from here in the Mellofuck,
and he brought it to life with his
and he brought it to life
poetic touch.
with his poetic touch.
This was in the late 60s, before
This was in the late 60s,
personal computers and desktop publishing.
before personal computer and desktop publishing.
So it was all made with typewriters,
So it was all made with typewriters,
scissors, and
scissors,
Polaroid cameras.
and Polaroid cameras.
It was sort of like Google in paperback form.
It was sort of like Google in paperback form
35 years before Google came along.
35 years before Google came along.
It's idealistic,
It was idealistic
overflowing with neat tools and great notions.
and overflowing with the neat tools and great notions.
Stewart and his team put out several issues of the Whole Earth catalog.
Stewart and his team put out several issues of the Whole Earth catalog.
And then, when it had run its course,
And then, when it had run its course,
they put out a final issue.
they put out a final issue.
It was the mid-1970s,
It was the mid-1970s,
and I was your age.
and I was your age.
On the back cover of their final issue
On the back cover of their final issue
was a photograph of
was a photography
an early morning country road.
of an early morning country road,
The kind you might find yourself hitchhiking on
the kind of you might find yourself hitchhiking on
if you were so adventurous.
if you were so adventurous.
Beneath it were the words,
Beneath it were the words,
"Stay hungry, stay foolish."
"Stay hungry, stay foolish."
It was their farewell message as they signed off.
It was their farewell message as they signed off.
Stay hungry, stay foolish.
Stay hungry, stay foolish.
And I have always wished that for
And I have always wished that
myself.
for myself.
And now,
And now,
as you graduate to begin anew,
as you graduate to begin anew,
I wish that for you.
I wish that for you.
Stay hungry,
Stay hungry,
stay foolish.
stay foolish.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you all very much. Ah.